first question we always ask clients is like, what is the purpose of this video? Like, in your perfect ideal world, what would this video do for your business?
That was Bobby Jocson. Bobby is the founder of Video VAAS, which is a subscription-based video company in Columbus, Ohio. He partners with business owners, founders, and marketing teams to create consistent, leveraged, highly researched short-form video for all of their social channels. I had a lot of questions for him about his business model and how he scales such a repeatable offer. And today, you and I are going to learn the psychology behind good social media video, why emotional storytelling is way more important than production teams and high-budget video, how Bobby structures his business model to build trust with his clients, and the million-dollar question, whether or not subscription video is really worth it. If you stick around to the end, we also talk a little bit about the mental health side of social media and entrepreneurship. If you're a marketer or founder looking to scale high production social video for your business and drive more traffic, this episode is a must listen for you. Some of the small nuances of how Bobby navigates social media, the small little hooks that we use, and also some examples from common brands that you guys have heard of as well. This is entry 89 of the podcast. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Be sure to tag us on LinkedIn at Andy Milligan and reshare with your network of high-performing marketers. And if you got value from this episode, then definitely be sure to join our crew of 211 highly engaged, high-performing marketers in the Columbus region and nationwide to get a 2-paragraph summary of a weekly spotlight of a high-performing marketer. That'll be in the first link below, along with all of Bobby's information. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, this is Bobby Jocson.
So I use an app now called Opal. You've probably seen their ads before.
Yeah. I looked at that like last year. That's been a while. Yeah. How is that?
I mean, it's great. And it's terrible sometimes. But you can use it for free. But when you're using the free version, you can override like the rules you have set up for locking things down. But so last year, I ended up paying for it. So I paid for the yearly, which I think is like probably 80 or so dollars a year. But it literally locks your phone down. Like I have it set to the max lockdown. So a couple times throughout the day, it'll lock down all my social apps and you cannot override it, right? Like you can't go into the back end of your phone and try to change the time. Like it has it completely locked down. It's nice, but it's also, you go through times where you kind of really want to get into a particular app. And there's been some instances where like I've needed to go in for some type of work situation. I can get onto it on my computer. I guess that is, I could have it linked to my computer, but I haven't done that yet. But it's been good, like it's more just a reminder of like at 7 p.m. I have it locked down and it says like family time, right? So it's like,
well, it's also like, and that's, I think the biggest value in something like that is like, I think it's funny how it's like the moment you pay for something like that, now it's like, okay, now like that's the buy-in, right? It's like paying for coaching. Like you could probably implement a lot of the stuff yourself. Like you manually have the willpower to not do it, but the fact that you like acknowledge the problem that you acknowledge the problem as being big enough to where something you invest in.
Yeah.
It's always like workshopping a solution, I think.
Yeah, I know. I've heard a lot of people say they like the brick. I like Opal in the fact that it's just like it's already built in, right? Like I don't have to have a physical thing. But yeah, it is definitely a problem, especially when you get to the point or when you're in a profession that you feel like you can kind of justify it sometimes, right? You can say like, I'm just doing it because I'm trying to do a little bit of market research and figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
You can play a lot of weird head games with yourself. Brick also has great video ads. Brick has been like if you go on their Facebook ads library, I've used that a couple times to kind of show clients specific examples. They do a really good job, and they kind of take more of like the aspirational approach to their ads, where Opal does the same thing, where they're kind of putting you in a situation where when you're watching the video, you're like, I wish I lived that intentionally. Right. It's kind of like the what's the word for it? It's like those TikTok videos where people have like their morning routine and it's like so buttoned up and you're like, I can do that. Right. And it's just you're just selling something that's pretty fake, like that's not actually what's going on in most people's lives. But that's kind of the approach that they take.
Yeah, that's a really good segue. And I think like part of it is the product, like the tangibility of the product, so they can like tie the end result to like, oh, like I need this physical thing to help me reach this thing that's like almost totally unrelated. And I think, I mean, that's like the concept of all advertising is like sell. That's what Hormozy says. Like sell the vacation, not the flight, or like sell the outcome, not the destination, or sell the destination and not the trip, or something like that. So yeah, I think it's really hard to do that and apply that, but I have seen
It's
they do crank their video marketing though too. Like if they have such good hooks and they'll have like the guy zooming on the camera and will be holding it and then put it on the phone. Um,
yeah. And And it's kind of like a domino effect in most advertising, especially that type of product where you're sold something that if I get this, then I'm going to end up doing all these other things, right? Or I'll be motivated to do all those other things. Same
yeah.
thing with supplements. I think supplements is another big industry that kind of uses that to its advantage, where it's just natural to think, okay, if I get this supplement, if I get this protein powder, or if I get these creatine gummies,
I was
I'm
just
going to
about
end
to
up
say
working
that.
out, right? I'm going to end up
Yeah.
working out. Same thing with workout apparel, right? Like if I get these 10,000 workout shorts, I'm going to be going to the gym every single day. And you're kind of playing off of that emotion. And it's, I think when you say it like that, it sounds deceitful, but I think it's just a natural human thing to want to kind of gather the proper things to then feel like you're ready to go and do that, right? It's also the same when people say, I'm going to start going to the gym when I get in shape more, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm not ready to go to the gym because I'm not in shape enough yet. I think it's kind of like the same thing. It's like I need to get all these things in place and then I can do the thing
Yeah. It's
instead
like
of
that. I had that like that same example was like we just flew over here last night, and it was the people that say like they make the wrong associations between like the outcome and the inputs. So like Katie was talking about like first class flights versus wealth. I was like, okay, well that might not be completely correlated because there's someone who will shell out their entire bank account to buy a first class ticket. Doesn't mean they're wealthy, right? So in the same way that someone who owns all the gym shorts or is investing a lot into the supplements and the routine and the things that are supposed to support the lifestyle that they want, but they're not actually taking action on. I think it's always elusive. It's always so much more tempting to create the illusion that we are that person, and it's easier to convince ourselves that we're making progress towards that when in reality it's just like putting it off. And I know I do that in so many areas that it's refreshing to think like I think the only way to like circle that square is to like try and identify it and like point it out in other people, and also like think, okay, where am I doing that too? Because I can think of so many things. It's yeah,
yeah, it's the difference
it's
between
such a
motivation and discipline, right?
yeah.
Motivation is, you're going to get the motivation when you get the new creatine supplement or the new protein powder or the new workout shorts. And that motivation obviously will eventually fizzle out. And discipline doesn't have to be as scary of a word, I think, as most people think about it. It's really just being consistent and knowing that, if I'm going to work out 5 days a week, I'm going to work out 5 days a week knowing that not every workout is going to feel amazing. And it doesn't have to be the best workout you've ever done. Sometimes discipline is not feeling great that morning and going in and not having a great workout at all, but knowing that you just went in and you did the act to know you're kind of setting yourself up for that domino effect for the rest of the week. I think that's what I'm consistently thinking about is like, is this being powered just off of motivation or am I action oriented to the point where I know it's not going to be perfect every time, but I'm just going to be consistent with it.
Yeah, there's a
Probably should do
book.
that with my content marketing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like there's as soon as you get on that rabbit hole, we can start talking about things we don't like about ourselves all day. But there's a book I want to share with you. It's called Everything You Just The Art of Thinking Clearly by Rolf DeBelly. So like, and I think it's really cool that kind of you are thinking about these things. This is like the entire reason I started the podcast was it's like how people apply, like you have like these big higher order, almost like psychological just things to be true, and then like how you apply them to like different areas of marketing or sales or conversions or anything is like I think what makes it the most effective, because then it kind of gives you a baseline to go off of. But the book The Art of Thinking Clearly by Rolf DeBelly is like I forget how many aphorisms it is, but it's like human biases and like things that we foundationally think to be true and how they impact all of our decisions. And he gives like really tangible examples of them in real life. So one of them was like there's like the sunk cost fallacy. There's which is the one where it's like, okay, it's already bad, doesn't matter how much worse it can get. There's like the house money effect. So and it's kind of like breaches in with like basic like marketing psychology. So like the pricing standards, like the movie theater, like if you price popcorn at like $2, people are gonna buy. If you like price popcorn at like $2, $7, and $9, people are either gonna buy the $2 or the $9 one because they're not gonna waste money on the $7 one because it's so close to the top one. But the house money effect too was really interesting to me. That's where if people are rewarded, it's kind of like the gambling principle. So people are rewarded. Like if you give people go into a casino, you give them $500. They're like, oh man, like this is house money. I'm gonna spend this however I want. But in reality, it's still $500. You could have walked your ass away and had a guaranteed $500. People are so much more likely to gamble that money because they view it as like bonus. And so like you can apply that to like a million like marketing campaigns, like in-store credit, like things like that. But it's like so many of those like quick hits, like here's the principle, here's an example of how it crushed. And like when I hear you talk about like the bigger sort of like bigger human motivation principles, that's like really fascinating to me because I think that's how where you like really have to start before you get into like the technicality and the creative. Like okay, like here's this landing page or like here's this video. That's kind of the main thread we want to pull on. How do you? Is that something that you think about like beforehand? I think it's something that maybe we don't consciously say like, okay, this is the exact principle I'm trying to leverage with this video or this like creative asset or campaign or whatever. But do you find yourself kind of referencing like the bigger picture stuff, like when you go in and, you know, timeline and edit or before you do any of your projects?
Well, even before that, I think like just from the act of creative in general, right? There's a big difference between like being creative and being able to be creative consistently every single day, right? Like quote unquote, right? Same thing with the discipline and motivation thing. It's hard to run a business in creative where you're just running off of motivation all the time, right? And I think, we'll
Yeah.
probably get into it later, but that having processes and systems in place to kind of get you as far into the process as possible without even really having to think about it to then be able to save your energy and creative energy for that. But in terms of videos, I think it just depends on the video and the client that we're working with. The first question we always ask clients is like, what is the purpose of this video? Like in your perfect ideal world, what would this video do for your business? And obviously the answers are wide ranging. Some's just, I just want this because it's an awareness campaign and I want to be able to showcase the different services or the product that we provide. And then other ones are going to be more specific from a direct response perspective. Like one interesting one that we're working on right now that we just started was with a resurfacing company. Right? We're creating UGC videos now for a resurfacing company. And it's really then going into social and figuring out what is working really well and then trying to replicate that. And I think like taking resurfacing, for example, which is a very niche thing, it kind of goes in hand with that aspirational approach. So if I have a house and I have a garage and I have a garage that's cracked and it's rough and it just doesn't look good, I'm less likely to want to spend time in it, invest in the garage, right? But if I have a garage that has that rubbery flake material that just looks clean, it looks professional, right? I'm gonna have way more motivation to want to one spend time in it and invest in organization and yada yada yada. So the same could be applied across the board, right? The same could be applied for a products company, a software company. So I think the first question always is like in your ideal world, what would this video do, right? Like what would this video invoke from an emotional standpoint, and what would you want people to do after watching this video?
Exactly, dude. It's so crazy. It's so crazy, like how similar it actually is. No matter like the medium of expression, like that's literally the first question I ask. Like, when we do like wireframe mockups for like landing pages to say, okay, this person, because they know that's, I think, our biggest thing, like our biggest skill and our biggest asset, something that like AI or anything will never be able to replace is they know, client knows their customer, right? They know their emotions, they know their pain points. Now, what is the ideal action that they take based on what they see, you know? So, say someone comes to this website or they see this video, what is the response that you want them to have? Get client, make them say that, like, okay, this is what I would feel, this is what I want them to feel, and then getting them to take action on that emotion that they experience in that brief landing, or in that brief period of time that you have them, or have that attention. And I think like being able to like layer on like the force multipliers for you, that's like compelling hook, good visuals, good assets. And then when you match that with the foundational stuff, like having the messaging on point and then really addressing the right pain point, I think that's when you kind of, when you align all those, that's when you start to hit the home runs. And I would even argue, I would like to hear your opinion on this, but even like production quality comes second behind like actually knowing the customer and knowing the message. Because I mean, obviously, I think especially nowadays, like having like a really good hook is just necessary to get a foot in the door. But what's your, like, how much, if you had to like scale weight, like the importance of the different assets that go into like a video, like a short form video, for example. So video, as you mentioned UGC.
Hmm.
How much would you prioritize like the importance of, say, the hook, the messaging, and the production quality? So you have those three things: hook, production quality, and messaging. How would you allocate like the percentage of importance of those three things? And is there nuance between different industries or different goals or et cetera, or different calls to action?
Yeah, I think it depends on the client, right? Like, there are some clients that, because at the end of the day, too, at the end of the day, we do what the client wants, right? Like we'll
Right.
give our opinions and we'll be able to suggest things, but if a brand wants to stay pretty buttoned up, right, we'll make sure that their visuals match that and they stay pretty consistent and have a perceived higher production value. Whereas, with UGC, which performs really well, and we do that as well. Um, Production value isn't as key. I would say with direct response ads, production is less important, especially in short form video, because you're really trying to hone in like what is like what we talked about before. What is the goal that you want people to do after watching this video, and then developing like what is that hook, right? And that hook obviously is then tied to the messaging within that. Whereas, I have a robotics and automation company. They want to stay a little bit more buttoned up, and be able to kind of have that more perceived higher end feel. So I think it's definitely a case by case basis.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is driven off of like the client themselves, right? Like I said, we can suggest and give feedback all we want, but we also want the client to be happy with the video. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah. That's such a, and that's honestly, I think a lot of, I mean, just through these conversations, I think a lot of people are able to relate to is that you have to find that way of communicating to where you sort of land in the middle of that Venn diagram, right? Because
Mhm.
if you are just, and we kind of talked about this last time almost, but if you position yourself as just like we talked about it in terms of like being a designer, but if you position yourself as just the task taker and the person that's there to just answer all of their, fulfill all of their creative requests. I think that's even on what got us in touch in terms of like me dissecting your models, that you risk falling into that. But it's really, you have to offer your expertise to, like, a, grow the relationship and expand it beyond just being that task taker, and then also being somewhere where you're more of a like strategic implementer. You're actually marketing their business for them, and they start to trust you to not just give advice, but also just take on more responsibility. And that's where I think, when I think of all of our best clients that end up doing site maintenance plans and like ongoing marketing, SEO and stuff, like those are the relationships that I'm really trying to build around. But how do you sort of like dovetailing like into your business model with VAAS and stuff. How do you take that position as like the expert when it is so when you say like video subscription service, it can
Mhm.
fall into that bucket of like, task taker designer. Like they are the directives of the creative. They kind of probably have an idea if they know what they want. But how do you transition that into being like their video resource rather than just, like comparable to like a production, just stock video library, like a freelancer? Like what's your
Yeah.
differentiator there?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to trust. So, initially we need to be able to build the trust between the client so that they know that we can get the task done that they obviously reached out and signed up for. And then, each client that kind of they take a different trajectory depending on the client, right? Like we might get to the point where we kind of just take over the videos and we're kind of on autopilot and they trust us really quickly and we just go with it. And it's a situation where they don't really have to think about it anymore. And then you might have other clients who are going to be much more involved and may stay more involved for the entirety of the relationship. So I think it's just understanding like who's who and which client prefers what. So I think it all comes down to trust, and I think that's the most important thing. Because people at the end of the day, and I was just having this conversation with one of my editors, is we pride ourselves in producing really high quality work at the price point that we're at, and but we also deliver on speed as well, right? So I think like we have to be able to balance both of those because some of the reason why clients bring us on is because of convenience. One, because they know we have the ability to just take over the video and put it on autopilot. And two, it's just a convenience factor and it allows them to focus on other things inside of their business. The other
Yeah.
thing is the type of client. So I might have like we have clients who are creative agencies, but we also have clients who we're working directly with the business. Usually what I see is creative agencies are always going to be a little bit more involved because they're in the marketing and creative profession. They just may not have a video arm to their business. So we can kind of plug and play within their team where they're working with their clients, but we're on the back delivering their video. Those clients are always going to be a little bit more involved. But then we might be working directly with a business and we might take over more of the video side and the creative strategy side much quicker or entirely once that trust is built.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think like this is what we even say to our clients is that you're really trying to not you're not selling the result, like whether you're marketing yourself or you're on these calls, you're selling a meeting with yourself. You're selling the next engagement, you're selling the delivered value over time. And I think, trying to take that bigger picture approach is that it's almost like you lead with the deliverable, but you don't make that all they get, right? So you want them like after they converse with you, after they have an experience with you. This is like the whole client experience part that I'm like, it's just like fascinates me. This is what I'm always coming back to is like, how do I create something that different? How do you create something that's so that over delivers on value so much that they like it's not even like when it comes to like cutting a marketing expense or looking at their budget, it's just like a no-brainer. And the factors that go into that, like the biggest one is the staying top of mind and just the trust and the communication because that just sticks with people so much more. Like the vibes that you get from like a better call are going to stick around longer than the feelings from like a really good video or the feeling from a really good landing page because it is so kind of temporary and it is something that always has to be, especially with content, like content never stops, and there's going to be times where you don't deliver and the work isn't as good because that happens, but it's really maintaining the relationship, I think, is the key element